All right, let's just jump right into it. We saw in the previous video that a complex number c was defined as being a plus I times b, and we saw that it had a real part, and the real part that would be a, whereas the imaginary part, let me just write it here, the imaginary part of c, that would be, yes, you guessed it, it would be b. And again, remember, you don't include the I. The imaginary part is simply what you multiply with I. All right, now let's say we don't just have one imaginary complex number, sorry. We also have another complex number, let's call it w, and that could be c plus id. All right, so we have two complex numbers, and we would like to see what happens if we say that's c and we add c with w. So let's just do it in different colors here. So if we should just make it totally clear, let's just recolor these like that and make this green also. Perfect. Now we would like to know what happens if we add two complex numbers together. Okay, let's just write it out. So we have c is a plus ib. Let's just add some parentheses to make it clear. And then we have w, which is c plus id. Okay, perfect. Now it's actually pretty simple to add complex numbers. All you do is you take the real part, so that's a and c, and you add those together, and then you take the imaginary parts, so that would be ib and id, and then you add those together. So what you get is, let's just do it in black now, you would take the real part of c, which would be a, and you would add it with the real part of w, which is c, and then over here you would have ib, which is the imaginary part of c, and you would add it with the imaginary part of w. Now let's just clean this up a little. We see that both b and d is multiplied by I, so let's put that outside a parenthesis, and we get a plus c plus I, and then we multiply that into the parentheses, and we have b plus d. So if we had to right now say what is the real part of the new complex number c plus w, then the real part would simply be a plus c, and the imaginary part of our new complex number c plus w, well, that would of course be b plus d, because it's simply what we multiply with the I here. That's our imaginary part. So pretty easy, we just add the real parts and add the imaginary parts, and that's how you add complex numbers. Let's also look at how you subtract them, and you might guess how you do that because it's very similar. So we say c and we subtract w, then we write it out once more. So we have c is a plus ib, and then we subtract w, which is c plus id. And here it's very important that you notice these parentheses, because when we have the minus outside, we'll have to make it go in on both the terms. So what we get here is still a plus ib, that doesn't change, but now we have minus c, and we have minus id, because this minus goes into both parts. So if we just do it on a new line down here, once again we take the real parts, so we take the real part and subtract the real part of w, so we get a minus c, and we do the same for the imaginary parts as before. So we have over here we have plus, we have this part ib, so that's plus ib, and now we have minus id because this minus came in. All right, once more, let's put the I outside of the parentheses, so we get a minus c, and here we have plus I, then parentheses, b minus d. So you see, it's very similar to when you add them. When you add them, you take the real part of one complex number and add the real part of the other, and you take the imaginary part of c and add the imaginary part of w. When you subtract them, you do the opposite. You take the real part of c and you subtract the real part of w, and for the imaginary parts you do the same. You take the imaginary part of c and you subtract the imaginary part of w. Alright, I think that's all for this video. In the next video we will maybe look at the complex conjugates, or maybe we will first look at an example where we see how you subtract and add complex numbers.